রিভার্বটা কেটে দিন। রিভার্ব
So we are continuing our discussion on this very important book on Indian philosophy, especially Vedanta, that is Vivekachudamani. Om Sudhismriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram. So as you know, this text has got 584 verses in Sanskrit, and it is focused on 51st verse. You find 7 questions on the nature of reality and what's the meaning of human existence, where do we come from, what's the ultimate goal of human life, and what are the spiritual, philosophical values that we have to uphold, how to attain the level of spiritual enlightenment which helps us to look at entire existence as one spiritual family. On the one hand, this philosophical perspective towards everything in this world, at the same time how to enjoy lasting peace and contentment within. So the first question was, ko nama bandha, etc., how bondage. As I mentioned earlier, Kathamesha Agada, how did this bondage came into existence, and how do we, how does it continue, Katham Padishthasya, Katham Vimosha, how to get out of this, and then what is the nature of Atman, what's the nature of non-Atman. So all these questions are asked. So first of all, for every human being, what he needs is to feel that all the worldly enjoyments do not constitute the ultimate value in life. That level of, we may call it a kind of spiritual common sense. This can come in so many different ways. Sometimes in some people we find many great mystics, saints and sages. They suddenly had this inner awakening when something happened to them that went against their expectations. Some kind of a total disappointment, a disastrous experience, failure in life, all can make us think of the ultimate goal of human existence, and we can help us to reprioritize the values that we uphold in life. That's why Patanjali, the great author of Yoga, Yoga Sutras, tells you that only an evolved person will be able to feel this kind of spiritual discontentment, spiritual disappointment. It's not disappointment really speaking. It is a spiritually nourishing feeling of incompleteness of all worldly enjoyments when we become convinced of some higher transcendental values. Now, in this context, the teacher begins a discussion about the empirical worldly phenomena, including our own body and so on. So of course, we discussed this earlier, but it's worth discussing because the verse from 124 onwards, the teacher is analyzing the nature of non-Atman, the non-eternal, the non-immortal, the impermanent, what Buddhists call the impermanent. So, and that includes our physical body. So that's why he gives a physical anatomy of human body system. And then again, the teacher will tell you all our feelings, emotional feelings, our ideas, our preferences, our thoughts, all these together constitute the subtle body, Sukshma Sarira we call it. The physical body is called Sthula Sarira, the subtle body means the personality behind the physical form. When you think of a person, you feel that what he writes, what he speaks, what ideas he stands for. That's a higher dimension of his personality, higher than the physical body. There are many great men and women in the world who are physically not very remarkable. Many of them. Even Stephen Hawking, who lived till a few years ago, he passed away. Nothing glorious about the physical body, but he was a great man. You can find many such people. I'm just giving an example. There are, of course, people who combine both. But it shows that the real personality is behind and beyond the physical dimension of human personality. The third factor is Karana Sarira, which means our basic lack of understanding of our true nature. So we are going to discuss one after another. So this verse is that is 72nd that we just discussed briefly. I shall repeat again. So the verse is Majjasti Medha Pararekta Charmattu Gahayihi Dhadubhihi Ebhihi Anvitam Padur Vaksho Bhuja Prishthamastakihi Angaihi Ubangaihi Ubayukta Medat. So what is the physical body? It's a wonderful anatomy of the physical body system. It is an object that we see. It is not the seeing subject. It is the object that is seen, that is experienced. And it's nothing but just, externally if you think of it, this body is not something to be proud of. This human body can be a wonderful instrument for practicing higher values. So it has got a sublime purpose, no doubt. But by itself, when we begin worshippers of a body, when we become worshippers of our own body, when we put bodily pleasure, bodily enjoyment above everything, then there is something to be ashamed of. Because there is nothing that this body contains that's very remarkable. Anything that comes out of the openings, the 9 organs, 9 openings of the human body system, you won't touch it, then you have to wash your hands with soap before eating food. So that's a skin bag, really speaking. If it is something so precious, if you have got a bag full of jewels and gold, then if something comes out, a few gold coins get spilled over, you take it. You don't wash your hands. So is the body something so wonderful? And if something comes out of this body, then it is unhygienic. It is against basic common sense to eat food after touching that whatever comes out with your finger. You have to wash your hands, hand sanitizer. At the same time, the same human body can be used for doing great work in this world. You can help others. After all, men like Jesus Christ or Buddha or any great spiritual teacher, they also had the same body mechanism that all of us have. Buddha also had the same body, maybe slightly taller. Christ had the same body, but he had a beard, that's all. So but then, physically speaking, they were not very different from any of the human beings. But they were totally different from other common human beings. In what way? Because they used their body, which also means their mind and intellect, for a higher purpose. To teach something that is so far beyond the body, beyond empirical. So the great teacher gives a list of this physical system, in this anatomy of the human body system. 7 ingredients he called. So, and what he says is marrow, bones, fat, flesh, blood, skin, cuticle. These are 7 items. The externally what you can interact. And internally something different that you can't give a list of. And also, it consists of limbs and their parts, legs, thighs, chest, arms, back, and a head. And this is the body system, a kind of machine. It's a machine. A machine is made of parts. You can take one part out and it becomes dysfunctional, really, like a car or any system. If you take one part out, it becomes non-functional or dysfunctional. It is not complete in itself. Say a stone slab, like a natural rock in nature. It is a composite entity, not made of parts. But a machine is different. So human body can at best be compared to a machine. All these are different parts of the body, this machine. And this machine is what we consider to be our true nature, our true being when we say I. Normally in our conversation, in human life situations, when you use the word I, we mean this physical body. And when you are a musician, you may say, I enjoy the music. There, by the word I, you mean your mind, perhaps. When you write something, when you make a discovery in a laboratory in modern physics, then you may say, well, I enjoyed reading the book on science. You are talking about your intellect. So body can be I at one level. Mind can also be I. When you're hungry or thirsty, I am hungry. It's a mind that feels, the emotional system that feels hunger and thirst. Happy, unhappy, pain, pleasure, and so on. And then when you are a scientist, when you maybe if you make a discovery, you feel a great intellectual satisfaction, the intellect. So still you would, well, I enjoy reading the great book. It's the intellect. So all these become I, depending upon the condition. It's got the situational changes in our own interpretation and definitions as to who we are. And then they all combine together, Paduru Vaksho Bhuja Prishthamastagehi Angehi Uvangehi Vayuktasam. Vayuktam Edat. So all these parts, they combine together, I, etc. They become a machine. And then the verse continues, Aham mamedi prasidam shariram mohaspadam sthulam iti iride buddhaihi. Buddhaihi means people who are informed, well informed, in a relative sense, not philosophers. I don't think a man like Socrates would have considered himself to be just with the physical body, because he didn't hesitate to drink the poison hemlock, you can sort of study the great Greek philosopher. Did he consider himself to be physical body? So you can find such great men in all traditions, in all civilizations. You go as far back as you should. So it is said, according to one records history of Greek philosophy, Xenophon, one of his disciples. He was an householder. He was not necessarily a great thinker, but he was a great admirer of Socrates. Went and tried to help him to escape, because he was sentenced to take the poison hemlock, to commit suicide as a punishment. That's ancient Athenian and Greek law. So anyway, the hierarchy did not appreciate or understand this great philosopher. So when a disciple who used to attend his classes, like Plato, not as prominent as Plato, but a minor figure in Greek philosophical tradition, he went and requested Socrates to escape from the prison. And then he refused, of course, he refused. Then he asked another question, how do you want us to bury you? And then his response was, for that you should know who I am. Bury you means bury. How did Socrates want himself to be buried? That was the question put to him. He said, for that you should know the real I. Now, that could be just a page, one of the pages of Upanishads you can find, going back to 4,000, 5,000 millennium BC, so to speak, 4th millennium BC. You can find many such instances, stories throughout Hindu Puranas, philosophical works. The idea of defining oneself as something beyond the empirical, beyond the objective world. So his aham mamedi prasidam shariram mohaspadam sthulam iti iride buddhaihi. Normally people define themselves to be I, aham mama, I and mine. So mine or I. The I here always implies, by the possessive case, always implies the physical body. Mohaspadam. And this misunderstanding is rooted in the ignorance of our own true nature. That's what the teacher tells you. So that's the basis of bondage. Defining or understanding ourselves just as this physical body. Nabho, then it continues, Nabho nabasud dahanambu bhumayaha sukshmani bhudani bhavantitani, etc. Matras, of course, then parasparam shei militani bhutva sthulani cha matrastitiya vishaya bhavanti shabdadiya, etc. And this continues. So the teacher tells you that normally people have the delusion of thinking of themselves to be this physical body when they use the word I and mine. But really speaking, this is just an objective world. And they're all combined together. They're all put together like a car. The parts of different cars are put together to form the machine. The machine is not a composite single whole. It is made of different parts. So that's why parasparam shehi militani bhutva sthulani cha sthula sharira hetavaha. All these parts are put together, and then what happens is matra statiya vishaya bhavanti shabdadaya panchasukhaya bhoktuhu. What happens is all these are meant for human enjoyment. Whatever we normally consider I or mine, where I am the physical body, I am the emotional system, I am the intellect. All these are nothing but objects, external things. They do not constitute the real I. Of course, in different situations, we may look upon our mind as the I, the real personality. Physical body, well, I am running fast. The physical body is moving, the body is I. I am hungry and thirsty, mind is I. I read a wonderful book, I enjoyed the book. It's the intellect that enjoys reading the book. So, body, mind and intellect can be the actual meaning of I or mine in different contexts, but they all constitute the perishable objective world. They are not the subjects, they are only objects. They have only borrowed intelligence. That's an interesting part of machine. You may call it artificial intelligence, may call it modern times. But if artificial intelligence can create a man like Buddha, then we can, of course, agree with that. Because even the best of machines cannot ask this question, why am I here? Who made me? What's the purpose of my existence? Even the basic questions that children study, when children don't study philosophy, maybe the first primer that you study in philosophy or spirituality, even that question, that subject will not be intelligible to the most advanced machine. Machine can do wonders based on borrowed intelligence. Intelligence that is programmed into it. The programmer may be a great person. Maybe the machine can do far more efficiently than the programmer, whatever he wants the machine to do. But machine cannot turn back, well, why am I here? Machine cannot enjoy reading, listening to music or reading a poetry. Machine cannot. So there is something in machine that is wanting. So what Shankaracharya says is, mind, intellect, body, everything is like a machine. You may call it maybe the mind of an Einstein, maybe an advanced machine, but it's a machine only. You can't get from Einstein what you get from a Christ or a Buddha or a Shankaracharya. Of course, there were great scientists, also great thinkers, going far beyond the normal range of professional scientists. They were thinkers also. They have some spiritual aspect to their personality and their discovery. Still, they cannot give to this world certain answers to fundamental questions of human existence. Now, this subject continues for a few more verses. Next verse is 75. Maybe slight changes will be there in your system, but you can see. Ye esha mudha visheshu baddhaha raguru pasena sudurdamena ayanti nidyanti athas urdham uchchaihi sukarma dutena javena nitaha. Now, here the teacher uses one word, ya eshu mudhaha visheshu baddhaha. So in that sense, mudha literally means those who are deluded. They are called Muda. So the translation may use the word the fools, but don't take it in the normal sense of conversational English. The actual meaning of the word Muda is somebody whose intelligence, thinking is deluded to such an extent that he thinks this world is meant for his enjoyment. Nothing more, nothing less. Such a person is a deluded person. And such a person is addressed or maybe referred to in this sense. Mudha means the translation can be misleading unless you understand. Mudha means those who are deluded in their mind and intellect in their perception of life and world. They are tied to these sense objects, Visheshu Bhedhaha. They are tied. Invisible, the kind of invisible rope or chain that binds them to this world. We can very easily understand this, relate this in our life. When our mind goes after something, when our mind is interested in something, also enjoys that object, we are spiritually enslaved by desire. attachment to that object. So, in the coming verses, there is a very elaborate, very picturesque, graphic description of this mechanism of bondage, how we get bound. Again, you have to remember, this feeling of bondage can be felt only by people who are slightly above the normal level of evolution. Maybe in modern times, in this age of science and technology, internet, and a lot of uncertainties can frequently make us think, well, is there nothing better than this, the life that is worth aspiring for? That can come, that should come. In fact, if we can develop that kind of a higher kind of a spiritual dissatisfaction or spiritual discontent, if we can develop, it will be, life itself becomes more enjoyable. It may appear to be a kind of paradox, a conundrum, when somebody tells you that if you can feel dissatisfied, you can enjoy life all the better. So the point is, anyone who feels very happy and he has reached a peak of enjoyment when he has a raise in salary, or rather he is able to eat a good salad, and he thinks this is the highest level of enjoyment. That person is not very different from the members of the animal kingdom, really speaking, slightly above. Because if he doesn't get his regular salad, or if he loses his job, he will collapse. So his happiness is on an edge, very, very risky. But suppose he enjoys reading some great books, if not Bhagavad Gita or the Bible, or he can read at least Emerson, Thoreau and Whitman, some degree of higher evolution if you think, then you get the information you have lost your job, you are laid off. It won't crush you. Because our idea of life is slightly higher when we become aware of some higher possibilities, higher alternatives in life. If you are living at a physical level, the slightest physical pain can be in the form of job insecurity, anxieties and worries created by uncertainties in modern times, because we are defining ourselves to be the physical entity. Then what happens? The slightest problem can have a disastrous impact on the mind. But when we define ourselves to be something higher than the physical body, then the problems at the physical level, problems will be there, but those problems cannot shock us, cannot be a disaster. We'll be able to manage it, because the mind is equipped with a higher wisdom, common sense. And this higher wisdom reinforces, it enriches our mental system. And we are able to deal with everyday problems in a much more balanced, refined, secure fashion. That's the advantage of it. That's why it says, those who are bound with a strong chain to worldly enjoyments, what happens? Ragorupasena Sudadvena. That means there is a big rope, a stout cord of attachment, being attached to all worldly enjoyments. Very difficult to break it. So very difficult to snap. Then what happens? Now here's something to do with Buddhism and Hinduism. Hinduism and Buddhism will tell you that when we are attached to worldly enjoyments, it's a bondage, and when we are bound like that, that bondage can make us move up and down in this cyclic existence. Buddhism and Hinduism and Vedanta believe in the two doctrines of reincarnation and law of karma. So Buddhism has got pratitya samutpada, which is an important principle in Buddhism. Those who are more interested, hearing for the first time, you can listen to our Sunday lectures. We are being discussing Indian philosophical systems in sponsored by the Stanford Hindu Students Association. So we're dealing with Buddhism. So how we get caught, imprisoned and bound by our own desires. And this will create a strong desire to enjoy more, and we are born again. Again we enjoy and suffer, and again we die, and then we are born again. This cyclic rotation continues. So going up and coming down. That's why the statement is here, ayanti niryanti atha urdham uchchaihi. So what happens? We come and we depart up and down, because we are carried away by this strong bondage, that we are tied to this world of enjoyments by a strong rope of desire. This continues. Now, there are some very, very important verses in the Vivekachudamani frequently quoted, and one of the most celebrated verses is the next one. It's here, it is 76th verse. Sabdadabhi panjabhireva panja panjattamapusu gunena baddhaha kuranga madanga padanga meenaha brunkaga nara panjabhiranchitakim. A very well-known verse. It actually gives a very sad picture of human predicament. When we think that life is just an occasion, an opportunity for enjoyment, and this desire for enjoyment becomes a prison, a trap, a life-threatening trap in our life. And author gives examples from the animal kingdom. So, sabdadabhi panjabhireva panja panjattamapusa gunena baddhaha kuranga madanga padanga meena bringa nara panjabhiranchidakim. So all these 5 creatures from nature are mentioned. The deer, the elephant, the moth, the fish and the black bee. All these 5 creatures from nature. You know, they die, they get caught, they get imprisoned, and they die by the force of this desire for enjoyment. Is a very beautiful graphic description. And the description concludes with an exclamation, Nara Panjabi Ranjita Kim. What is there in store for the human beings who are attached to all this? Now, the implication is that each of these 5 creatures, for example, kuranga, I mean the deer, you know how they are caught by the hunter. Those who are hunting deer flesh to eat. In many countries it is a crime to hunt deers, but there are places where they enjoy all this. You know, terrible. So they are the most harmless creatures in the world. So when in ancient times, you know, the hunters, when they travel in forest, they play a flute, some kind of musical instrument, to attract the deers which may be hiding behind a bush or in a cave. So listening to this music, the deers come out. At that time the hunter will shoot an arrow. So they are caught by their attraction for the sound, sabda, sound, etc. And then moth. Now these moths are tiny creatures that normally emerge when, just after, especially in the monsoon in the tropical countries, when there's sudden rainfall, in the evening you find they they start this minor flame fire in the villages because so many moths all around, all these insects and moths. So the moths think that this fire is something attractive for them to eat. The flame, the brilliant light of the flame, villages will start small fires to attract these creatures, to get rid of them because they become a problem. So these moths are drawn towards the flame, they think. So the sense of vision, the sense of sight becomes the trap. In the case of the deer, it is sound that becomes the trap that leads to their destruction and death. In the case of the moth, it's the sight, the sense of vision, because they see the flame and they fly towards them, to the flame, and they get killed. Then the fish is drawn, attracted by the taste. So the bait will have something fixed to it in ancient times. So the fish is attracted by whatever you keep in the bait, as a bait, in the hook. They are not attracted by the hook. They are attracted by what is kept in the bait, which is designed to attract them, to trap them. And the fish may be caught and be killed, eaten. And then, of course, then there is, elephant, we left out elephant. Elephant is caught by the sense of touch, because normally elephants move in big herds. So sometimes you find huge elephants, parents with tiny elephant, we guarding them, and they be walking, touching each other too. And then they fall into a pit, dug by a trapper. That's how they catch elephants in Africa and in Asia and African countries. So because they touch each other, so they are trapped by the sense of touch. And then, of course, the last one is black bee. So these are all small creatures. They fly about in gardens, drawn by the smell of beautiful flowers. So that smell of flowers, the sense of smell, 5 senses of perception. Shabdadvi panjabireva pancha. I mean, the sense of sound, the sense of touch in the case of the elephant, the sense of sight, the case of mouth, and the sense of taste in the case of fish, and the sense of smell in the case of black bee. So black bee, they're all being trapped and they get killed. They lose their life and freedom because they are drawn to one of the 5 senses. The elephant is caught only by its attraction for touching. They move in large, they touch each other. So also fish drawn by the bait, taste. So in the case of human beings, so nara panjabhiranchita kim. Now, in the case of human beings, they are drawn by all the 5 senses simultaneously at the same time. Because we keep in our mind what we saw. So what happens is that memory, that becomes the trap. In the next verse is very powerful statement. Doshena tivro vishaya krishna sarpa vishadavi visham nihanti bhoktaram tashtaram chakshusapyam. You see, sense objects are much more virulent in their evil effects than the poison. Because the poison, you have to drink poison, you have to consume poison Then only it becomes a problem. When you see a poison bottle, when you see cobra, it doesn't kill you. You should be bitten by a cobra. You should consume poison. Then only it will have a terrible effect. It can kill a human being. But the point is, sense objects, you don't want to eat. See, when we see a visual object in the internet, that visual object can remain in our mental system for a very long time. And depending upon our own attraction, the strong memory that's registered in the mental system, it can be a door to destruction, self-destruction. You have not done anything. You have just seen a computer screen. You might have heard. Hearing also is bad enough. You may not see, but you may hear. That is another sense, sense of perception. Ears can also can be poison. So it's a very wonderful comparison. The poison of a snake becomes a problem when you consume it. The poison of a sense object, something that you see, because the mind will have a desire to see it again. You heard something, mind will have a desire to hear it again. So also the sense of smell, sense of touch and things like that. So, and especially in modern times, we can never exaggerate. We cannot speak enough about the dangers of internet and visual objects. Visual and audio together. They can be toxic poison. And here you don't have to touch the poison with your hand. You don't have to eat it. You can just see that. That's enough to register strong, poisonous, toxic potassium cyanide in the mental system. That can lead to some destruction. You can see many of the terrible things happening in modern times are just caused by the explosion of communication system, internet. Of course, it can be a wonderful tool also for spreading higher ideas, spiritual ideas. So, that's why doshena tivro vishaya Krishna sarpa vishadavi. So, in a cobra, Krishna means cobra. The poison of cobra is less poisonous than the poisonous of sense objects. And you don't have to see, you may listen to some absolutely nasty things in a radio. The man may be sitting 10,000 miles away, he can put poison in our mind. So that's a very interesting visual also. So that's why many of these ancient texts can be wonderful tools for spiritual education. Anyway, so this is an 8th century work, and this is a very important classical work for the beginners in Vedanta. You can have interaction, you are most welcome to ask questions. Thank you. Before concluding, we have some important announcements today. And that is next week there will be no class on Vivekachudamani. That means on April 25th there will be no class. And the reason is we are celebrating the 125th anniversary of the Vandanda Society. Swami Vivekananda founded this Vandanda Society on April 14th in 1900. So this is the 125th year. So we will have a big celebration, and that we held in Shanti Asrama Saturday, April 26th. Shanti Asrama is a very unique place because that's the oldest and the first shrine outside Asia, the first and oldest Hindu shrine outside Asia. That's about 90 miles away from here, more than 90 miles perhaps. And you are almost welcome to do RSVP. You can do RSVP from our website. If you just svedanta.org, or you can just Google Vedanta Society San Francisco, you can go to the home page, you can do RSVP. So, and also you can monitor our website svedanta.org. So another, that means next class will be on Friday, May the 2nd, 2025, 7:30. So we have a number of programs this year beginning in April. The first important event is April 26, Saturday in Shanti Ashrama, and then May 26, Memorial Day in Olima Retreat, and then another important event in South Bay on August 31st. You are most welcome. Now you can have interaction, you are most welcome.
We have a question, online question. We'll start with that. So the question is, if the mind and the intellect are also part of the I complex, what part of the human being that inspires us to realize the goal of life, which is to identify ourselves with the Atman or the I?
Now, it's a matter of evolution. At the grossest level, we may identify ourselves with the physical body. And at some higher level, as the mind and then the intellect. Now, behind the mind and intellect, or to activate mind and intellect, there is a higher reality that is that's our true nature, that's our true identity, that is Atman. So Atman is a word that we use to designate that reality which is beyond description or definition. So when you attach your mind and intellect to this Atman, then mind and intellect will not create any problem. This is an important thing. So we are evolving from body to mind. So when you meditate, for example, the classical meditation is a good example. When we sit and meditate, body is totally sitting quiet there, but mind becomes hyperactive frequently. Thoughts, ideas from workplace, different conversations you had, all will come in a flash in the mental system. At that time, mind becomes restless. Now, at the same time, you get up from there and read some spiritual book that tells you that even mind is not eternal. Even mind is not our highest identity, nor intellect. There is beyond all this, there is absolute reality, Atman. And that Atman is eternal, unchanging, is the essence of our true nature, Satchidananda, that is existence, knowledge and bliss. With this strong conviction, if you sit again for meditation, you find mind comes down. At least the confusion, the restlessness will be reduced. Or even if you listen to a music, spiritual music, there are terrible music things we know. Spiritual music, there are highly elevated musical examples. Then also mind actually goes beyond itself. Mind by its very nature is restless, changing all the time. Always, thought current, one after another, all these ideas come. But at the same time, a time comes when mind is no more being disturbed. At that time, mind is going beyond its normal structure. Okay? Then you are connecting your mind to Atman. For that, we should at least try to understand intellectually what it means. The first thing is to read these books. For example, now we know if a person feels restless, you don't have to worry. Mind is designed to be restless all the time. Mind never remains quiet for a minute. It jumps from one idea to another idea. It never remains neutral. It's like a pendulum going one after the other, faster than pendulum of a clock. Now, once we understand, then When our mind is disturbed, we'll be less disturbed. When we can keep in mind, oh, it's natural for the mind to be anxious. Anxiety comes down. Because your mind is going away from its normal restless nature. And if you read and if you practice meditation more and more, trying to feed our mind with spiritual food. This is very important. Mind becomes restless because we have deposited lot of junk in the mental system. We are not given good healthy food, spiritually healthy food, the mind. So listening to great ideas or karma yoga, all these are different ways of depositing good spiritual assets in the mental system, giving nutritious, spiritually nutritious food to the mind. The mind becomes less and less restless, more and more content, because it is going beyond itself. It is connecting with the Atman. Suppose something is moving all the time, you connect it with something stable, the movement gets reduced, it becomes stable. That's what happens when you meditate at a higher level. You're connecting yourself with Atman, going beyond your mind level and your intellect level. Okay? Yeah.
Just a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Is there's such a thing as mind getting attached to the senses or the pleasures of the senses? Is there such a thing that mind getting attached to Atman or Brahman? Or is there also a type of attachment is that a good attachment, bad attachment?
That's again, we should not imagine the mind is an entity. Mind should not be identified with what we call heart from a medical perspective. Mind is the seat of our emotions and feelings. We cannot name it, we cannot catch it, we cannot handle it a surgeon cannot touch it, with his tools. So when mind is attached to worldly things, mind itself becomes totally restless. That desire, this desire, this. It doesn't mean that Vedanta is a life-negating philosophy. Vedanta just tells us that whatever mind is attached to, whatever sense objects the mind is attached to, they come and go by their very nature. They are always in a flux. Now, from that you should try to get attached to soul, Atman. That is only a problem of language. When you are attached to Atman, what it means at the empirical level is you read spiritual books. Along with other things, you consider spiritual ideas as something important. When you feel a great attachment, the desire for higher ideas, lower ideas become less and less potent. That's a very important thing. See, great musicians who are physically handicapped did wonders, scientists, because they were attached to science, not to their body. Man like Stephen Hawking, what will he do with his body after all? So he could remain alive because he was attached to intellect or science and discoveries. That's one example. So he could leave behind his own body level and reach a higher level, means his intellect level. Now, when that happens, bodily problems will not be a very big problem for you. Similarly, but then again question arises, mind also is not always happy, intellect also is not very happy. So, intellect also will not be the ultimate answer. Intellectual enjoyment also will not give you always peace. When your mind is disturbed, when something unpleasant happens, you don't feel like reading Tolstoy or Chekhov or Shakespeare. You don't feel that. Your mind is too uneasy to read books or mystical works or anything. At that time, one should be able to go beyond even intellect. Again, it's almost like learning swimming by correspondence course. This is something that we can only explain in terms of real experience. Practice unselfishness, karma yoga, purity, compassion for everyone, all these fundamental, what you call, sadhana, sadhushta, sambati, 19th verse. It outlines the fundamental discipline, 19th verse of this book. We describe many times. So, it is something that we can even understand only by practicing or trying to practice some spiritual disciplines. Then only our mind will be able to understand it. Okay? Yeah. Thank you. So, okay.
So with the, thank you Swamiji for the lecture. With the senses, I definitely agree with you that, there's a lot of dangerous things out there, like the internet you've mentioned, and you've always highlighted the fact that we want to feed our mind good food. So if I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that the five senses, they feed the mind, which is considered, I guess, the sixth sense by at least Buddhism. And so as human beings, we have this body and mind, we have these five senses, so it seems that we don't want to be attached to the senses, and I understand that they can be very dangerous, but it seems like that finding a balance between, like feeding the senses, I guess, good food, like I think of going into nature and appreciating the beauty of flowers that are blooming in the spring, or listening to classical music.
Yeah.
That it seems that we want to find good food for the senses to feed the mind good food.
Yeah.
But then we want to understand that we don't want to be attached because it's still part of this phenomenal reality, and that we want to have this higher, lack of a better word, attachment to the Atman, this unchanging. But I guess finding a balance between living in the body and like having gratitude and appreciation with the senses, but not getting attached.
That's right. So thank you for the question. Frequently, there could be a lot of difficulties in understanding the actual implication of the Sanskrit word, which is translated into English as attachment. So here, attachment is a very inadequate translation of the Sanskrit word Sakti or Sangha or bondage, called Benthana and things like that. So when we use the word attachment, we are not talking about the natural attachment of a person for his lunch or supper, or to travel by train, you should maybe attach, not at all. A kind of obsessive attachment which makes you spiritually, mentally a slave, a kind of a feeling of spiritual, mental enslavement. That is the real meaning of attachment. Shraddhadi panjivireva panchato. So, Baddha, here what it means is, it catches you, it imprisons you. When you are so much obsessively attached to the point of being enslaved, and you want to get out of it, but you are not able to get out of it. That state of mind is the actual implication of the Sanskrit word, which is frequently translated into the English word attachment or bondage. That should be kept in mind. So, elephants were to walk. Elephants are highly evolved living beings. They have a very high level of intelligence. They can retain memory. They can be sensitive. When they go mad from time to time, their periodical insanity, semi-insanity. But They are wonderful living beings. They are capable of remembering. They are capable of interacting with human beings like almost like dogs. So there are cases where elephants take care of their children with compassion, love, or they are grateful to human beings. All these examples are there. So now, when it becomes a bondage, what it means is elephants touch each other and fall into a pit. In the case of human beings also, we have to live in this world. We need job. We need all the things, all the good things of this world. It's part of human existence. It's not attachment. That's not what is implied here. Obsessively tied to something to the point of being enslaved. And the person wants to come out of it, but is helpless, he cannot come out of it. That state of helplessness is the actual meaning of bondage here. This should be understood. Very often, when you read translations, Vedanta can be interpreted to be terribly negative. Absolutely no. If you read any book, any traditional Sanskrit book, commentaries, that's not what is meant. Lord Krishna asked everyone, you pray and you work. Mam anusmara, they will not fight, but work. So, action and contemplation, not negating life or negating the realities of human existence. It's a kind of spiritual common sense. A common sense comes to our mind. So here, attachment actually implies being tied, obsessively attached to something that becomes a prison in itself, and you want to get out of it. The classical example is drug addiction and alcoholic addictions. These are good examples. Modern time, internet addiction. That's another example, internet. It can be terrible addiction, can be self-destructive. And many people want to come out of it. They are ready to spend a lot of money to get out of it. They go for this treatment also. This they cannot. Very often they cannot, sometimes they can. So that should be understood very carefully. Many of these philosophical terms used in Sanskrit, they have a tradition of lineage of being interpreted through this unbroken succession or lineage of teachers and students. When you learn from such great teachers, you will have absolutely no doubt. But frequently they can be very problematic when we just read a brief translation. A translator cannot give an elaborate interpretation of every single word. It's impossible. Okay, thank you for the question. Is very relevant and very pertinent, very important. Okay, thank you. So we'll conclude now. Thank you. So please remember, there will be no class on this text on April 25th, and the next class will be on May 2nd. And please remember, those of you who want, you can do RSVP or to Shanti Asma on Saturday, April 26th. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.